Very much for joining me today. I hope that everybody who did celebrate Thanksgiving had a nice time off. I had lots of time to dive into Dorico 6, which I upgraded to finally on the Black Friday deals. Couldn't turn it down. But this is a topic today that's as old as I can remember in Dorico, and it has to do with the differences between base switches and add-ons, and the problem that this misunderstanding about base switches and add-ons often will lead to is just simply not getting the playback correct on your instruments. Now, sorry, actually, I see that I have the wrong view there. There you go. Here I am in full person. So yeah, there's this challenge that'll come up quite often where you have set up your expression map and individually you might find that your expression map triggers operate correctly and you're hearing things correctly. However, once you're in the throes of composing and you've added a few here and there, some things start to maybe not trigger at all, or some things are triggering entirely incorrectly, or you're expecting something to have only applied to one note or a small set of notes and it's continuing on into other ranges of notes. These are all symptoms that you have not either used base switches or add-ons or mutual exclusion groups correctly. And the definitions of these three concepts, let's call them, are not that well implied by their name. So you need to dive into the manual, or if you're watching this video, then you'll learn about it all here. So let's start with the fundamental difference between a base switch and an add-on very quickly. The most important thing is that a base switch is already mutually exclusive. So when you set up a base switch, and I'm going to show you a demonstration of this in just a minute, then as soon as you go from one base switch to another, a good example of two base switches would be sustains and legatos. When you go from sustains to legatos, the legato replaces the sustain. There's nothing about the sustain base switch which will be preserved into the legato unless it's been, unless you've actually written it into your expression map that they have something in common. But base switches replace each other. They are already inherently mutually exclusive. And this is the tool to use when you're switching between distinct articulations. I use them for all the main articulations, things like legato, spiccato, pizzicato. I define these all as base switches because if I write spiccato into my score, I want it to have nothing to do with any pits that came before it or staccatos or anything. Spiccato is its own articulation, and I want it to wipe out whatever memory Dorico has of my expression map, and from this point on play spiccato. So I use base switches for that purpose. Now add-ons are not inherently mutually exclusive. Add-ons can be stacked on top of each other, and this is on purpose, but it can have a lot of awkward outcomes that are, especially for people who are new to expression maps and how they work. This can be really unintuitive and extremely, frustrating because you can have suddenly you're looking at your score and you see that you've got, legato and consordino clearly labeled in your score, but you're not getting legato and consordino. Why? Earlier in your score, when you had legato and consordino, it was playing fine, but now it isn't. How come? Well, typically it's because maybe a bar earlier or 5-6 bars earlier, you had another add-on. So if consordino, let's say, is an add-on that is on top of legato, it's stacked on top. You're preserving everything about legato, but you're adding consordino on top. You may have done something similar by layering an add-on earlier, but you didn't actually remove it. You didn't remove that earlier add-on. So now Dorico is looking for legato plus whatever that mystery add-on is plus consordino. And it can't find that. It doesn't find that. And when it falls back to usually a natural playback technique, maybe that's sounding, maybe it's not sounding right. So that's the big difference and the big challenge. Base switches are already mutually exclusive, add-ons are not. Now, in order to resolve this issue, you have mutual exclusion groups. And this is actually a very, very powerful and I think not just a powerful way to resolve these problems, but it's also a great tool just in general to organize your expression map and really think through what your expression map's doing. Why is something a base switch? Why is it an add-on? But here's a good rule of thumb. All add-ons pretty much should be in an exclusion group, unless it's an extremely simplistic articulation map or expression map. All of my add-ons go into an exclusion group, a mutual exclusion group. The example I'm going to show you here is where maybe I have a base switch for pizzicato, but then I have two add-ons. One might be for Bartok pits, and the other might be for, what was it? Oh, I had set up Colegno, which isn't really a kind of pizzicato, but I would want to make sure that if I use Colegno, that it would make sure that it wasn't trying to read both Colegno and Bartok. I think it'll be easier if we look at an example here. So let me just jump in and look at the example that I have here. So I'm using an Iconica Sketch expression map that came with Iconica Sketch because it really doesn't matter which expression map we use. This is going to apply to any instrument. And what you'll see here is that they have set up, Steinberg that is, they've set up these base switches for fundamental, natural, pizzicato, spiccato, staccato, tremolo. These are all, of course they're going to replace each other. Of course they're mutually exclusive. I'm never going to play pizzicato and spiccato at the same time. I'm never going to play staccato and spiccato at the same time. Of course not. So those are set up as base switches, and then I don't have to think about mutual exclusion groups at all. You don't really need to use mutual exclusion groups in the context of base switches. Where I really need them is down here on these add-ons, where Colegno is going to be typically something that I might want to have as an add-on to some kind of short. That is something that I've done quite often in my expression maps, just to kind of group my shorts together. But a Bartok pits and a Colegno are not going to happen at the same time. The problem is here that since these are add-ons, they're not going to inherently replace each other. So what I have to do is I have to set up a mutual exclusion group down here. And you'll see oftentimes, especially if you're in fact, I think this is only if you are in Dorico Pro, that it sets up these mutual exclusion groups automatically, and you can see what they are down here. And if you want to manipulate any of this, get these icons to show up, you have to uncheck this checkbox. Now you can manipulate them of your own free will, right? But we can see here that there's been a few that have been set up automatically by Dorico. You can keep these or not keep these. This is another great example. Con vibrato and non-vib. Of course, you don't want to have those both on at the same time. However, you can wind up quite easily. I'll take that also as an example, and let's look at if we were to write this in here, and let's say that I'll just write some music in here. And I'm going to go ahead and throw that into galley view. Repeat these out a few times. Okay, so let's say that I pick this first note here, and I were to say, I want this Bartok. Oh, I guess I don't have that as a playing technique. So let's see if I have other ones. Well, comes up here. Well, bow on bridge and bow on tailpiece. Let's say that. I get some kind of little graphic there. Bow on bridge, bow on tailpiece. Okay, so I get these little graphics, which mean bow on bridge and bow on tailpiece. Now, if I set these up as add-ons over here in my expression map, so I'll go to play mode, go into my expression map. This is the button here with the little puzzle piece that we use to add an add-on. Bow on bridge, I'll add that as an add-on, and bow on tailpiece, I'll add that as an add-on. So now I've got these two add-ons here. I'm going to go ahead and remove these two from the example. So now I've got these two add-ons right here. And obviously I am not going to bow on both the bridge and the tailpiece at the same time. So I would come in here and I would uncheck this box, and I could create a group that, you know, I can call it whatever I want. The name here from the name of the group is not that relevant in terms of how it functions. It doesn't need to match any playback techniques or anything. That's just there. Make sure it's named something so you know what it represents, right? But now if I go and add bow on bridge and bow on tailpiece here, now when I use either one of these, if the other one is lingering on some from a previous bar, it's going to be wiped off the slate. So only one of these can operate at any point in time. And that's going to be really important, because if I don't set up that mutual exclusion group here where I add the bow on tailpiece, this is going to, unfortunately, be inheriting the bow on bridge, right? So we're going to wind up with this looking for a natural note and looking in my expression map for some kind of combined definition that's got both bow on tailpiece and bow on bridge. And of course, it's not going to find that. Otherwise, I have to go and maybe set this one to natural like this, or have like a non bow on tail. You know, it's just, it gets convoluted and frustrating to have to manage, especially when you're trying to write a piece that will sound good in your mock-up, will come back playing back correctly, and will be readable to the player, right? Because the player doesn't want to see all these notation moments that are really just designed to tell the sample libraries what to do. The player, ideally, in a perfect world, what we write into Dorico will be something that the player would understand just as well as the sample library. So by using mutual exclusion groups, we're sort of telling Dorico what a player already knows, which is that you're not going to play Colenio and Bartok Pits at the same time. The player knows that, so they're not going to mistakenly try to do both at the same time. They're not going to bow on the tailpiece and bow on the bridge at the same time. But we need to tell Dorico to do that, because it's not a human player. It doesn't know those things unless we tell it. So mutual exclusion groups give us a way to work around the fact that add-ons are not already mutually exclusive. You don't need to use mutual exclusion groups with your base switches, because they already are mutually exclusive. It's just for the add-ons, okay? So as far as best practices go, my recommendation, and this is what I do, just make sure that you have every one of your add-ons in some kind of mutual exclusion group. Now, I've even gone so far as sometimes to encounter having an add-on that's in a mutual exclusion group all by itself, which is inherently non-functional. But the reason I still think it's a good best practice is that it forces me to go through the process of thinking about all the articulations and modifiers that are in my expression map, and really thinking through clearly, how am I expecting them to work? And just going through and putting the add-ons into mutual exclusion groups is kind of like a way to check my own work, to make sure to give more rigor and integrity to my expression map. So I hope that that's been helpful. I'm going to take a look here and see if there are any comments or questions in the discussion. Yeah, thank you, Michael. It might have been under Snap Pits. All right, that's a good point that Michael is making about base switches. If they are custom playing techniques, I think this is what you're saying, Michael, that if they're custom playing techniques that you are putting into your score that are not part of the traditional set, things like spiccato and pizzicato and so on, then base switches actually should be in a mutual exclusion group. I have not had that situation, I suppose, because I have generally placed all my my custom playing techniques, I guess to the best of my knowledge, have always fallen into an add-on. But I could imagine a situation where if it was set as a custom playing technique, something that Dorico did not have an inherent understanding of, things like legato and staccato, that using the mutual exclusion groups may be necessary. Although I have read this in different places throughout the manual, that base switches are completely mutual exclusively. So I'd have to test that out myself. I think it's definitely an interesting point. I'm not sure about it, having not done it myself. But I will definitely take Michael's guidance on that, because I know that he has a lot of experience with this. So it's just something to keep in mind. And in general, another aspect to best practice is to, this is something I cover in other videos, but I encourage and I consider best practice for creating expression maps and playback templates to start with creating endpoint projects where you actually create an endpoint with all your expression maps and so on for a family of instruments, your winds, your strings, your brass, or maybe a particular library. This is your Cinebrass endpoint, and this is your Tom Hulkenborg brass endpoint, something like that. And in that situation, I actually like, in those projects, in those endpoint projects, to sort of try and stymie the system, see if I can get something to play back wrong, use all my add-ons in there, and make sure that they play exactly as expected, because that's a nice little sandbox where I can mess around, try all kinds of contortions, and as long as it all holds, then I know it's going to work once it's in my production environment. Okay. So I really appreciate everybody being with me this afternoon. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. I will be back here again on Thursday. And until then, I hope everybody enjoys whatever maybe they acquired on Black Friday. I got myself, of course, Dorico 6, which I am enjoying some of the new features there. Not that they're particularly practical for me, but I like to stay current and I like to support Steinberg. So anyway, that's it for today. Thanks again so much, and I will see you on Thursday. Bye for now.